God, I'm telling you, my dogs are barking today.
But man, my dogs are barking.
Well, welcome into the My Dogs Are Barking podcast. This week, we are on episode 3 of our series where we are interviewing a person that is a representative of each team Mississippi State is going to be facing in the 2024 football season. And this week, for episode 3, it's week 3 of the football season where Mississippi State is going to be traveling down to Tempe, Arizona to take on Arizona State. And man, what a matchup that is going to be. The representative for Arizona State and the host of the Stomp the Bus podcast is Mark Harris. Mark, we're so excited to have you on today. We'll bring Mark in here in just a moment. Austin, I do want to say hello to you, man. How you doing today? I like the Mike Leach shirt.
Thank you, man. Thank you. I'm doing good. So excited to be continuing this series, and I'm so excited to be talking to Mark here today.
Oh, yeah, it's going to be awesome. And Mark, I did want to ask, man, how long have you been kind of leading this podcast for?
Oh, that's a good question. Just a bit under, just a bit under 2 years. So I'd say like 22 months. We kind of started summer of 22, and it was shortly after. I'm getting my realignment moves all mixed up, but I think it was like fairly shortly after the UCLA USC departure.
Okay.
And then we speculated on like, oh, will the Pac-12 add Big 12 teams? They should have, but that's a different discussion. And now we're in the Big 12. So yeah, it's honestly like our 2 year kind of 2 year span of doing this has been a lot of just like depressing stuff for ASU. Just the whole end of the Herm Edwards era, kind of cycling through and everything that came with that. But it looks like things are kind of on the upswing now for Arizona State football. There's actually like a legitimate hope heading into the season. So, there's no more bowl ban possibility hanging over them. So yeah, it's been an interesting run so far, but, glad to be part of the College Huddle network. I think you guys are part of that too. And really excited about the non-conference game we have scheduled against Mississippi State. I think it'll be kind of two teams of similar quality. And I think that always makes for a really good non-conference game because then anything can happen. So,
Yeah, and you think about Arizona State. I know that the fans in Starkville or wherever alumni Mississippi State are going to be excited for those who make that trip because that's just such a neat place to go. But when you think about Arizona State coming into 2024, last season, like obviously the win-loss record is not great, but you have some potential with Coach Dillingham and his offense. The second half of the season, really starting at that homecoming game against Washington State, there started to kind of be at least some positive movement. But where would you say are the expectations for fans for Arizona State coming into the 2024 season?
Yeah, I would say most fans are kind of in the let's get to 6-6 type range. And some fans are like, oh, let's get to 7-5. But I think pretty much every fan would be happy with the 6-6 finish. 5-7, it would depend how it looked. Like, how did you get to 5-7? If you get to 5-7 just by, I don't know, you beat the two non-Power 5 teams or Power 4 teams that we play in the non-con, and you beat a bad Big 12 team, and you beat a team with an injured quarterback or something. Like, it might get looked at differently if you like have a huge upset win, and it kind of just depends how you get there. But I would say, to wrap it up, just kind of 6-6, 7-5, and hopefully, maybe you do better than that, but kind of just kind of get back on track.
I got you. So with a lot of the question marks, I feel like going into Arizona State season, losing Jaden Rashada, and then I think Dillingham's second season in Arizona, what would you say is going to be probably the strongest area of the team coming into 2024?
I think the running backs are going to be really good this year. I think Cameron Scatabo, he was kind of our do everything running back. He's transferred in from Sacramento State before last season, and he's just kind of a do it all guy. Like really tough runner, good receiver. They had him do like punts and stuff. They had him be like an emergency quarterback because last year the offensive line was one of like not a great position group to begin with, and then like our two starting tackles got injured in the second game of the year. There was injuries that just followed that, and it was just unworkable at some points in the year. And in fact, when they played at Washington, they actually played like I forget the final. I think it was like 15-9 or some weird. It was a super low scoring game. Washington clearly like was not at its best self because they would have won by more. But ASU also played well. But anyway, I bring it up because there was a point late in the game where they had to go for it on fourth down because they literally like didn't have the bodies to field a field goal unit. So
Wow.
that like one play kind of symbolizes just like where the program was, like just the amount of bodies that were available on the roster and all this. And I through the work they've done in the portal, and that won't happen again this year. But no, definitely the running backs. Rayleigh Brown is a guy they got from USC who's just oozes potential, and it's wild that he's like I don't know how USC couldn't find a way to use him. So I'm really excited to watch him. DeCarlos Brooks is a guy that he didn't have a crazy stats last year, but he was injured for good chunks of the year. You mentioned the Washington State game. He had like 3 touchdowns in that game. So he's just kind of your classic like inside runner, running back. And then they have a few young guys that they can go to as well. So running backs will definitely be big. They should have a good wide receiver unit. And then I'm thinking of the defense has a lot of new names. Defensive line should be solid. They have good edge rushers returning, so that's big. Linebackers is pretty much all like linebackers should be pretty good as well. I think the defense might be better than the offense this year just because you have a lot of kind of younger guys growing in it, and you have the coordinator return in Brian Ward. But if I had to put like one position group, I'd say running backs would be the best.
And on the flip side of it, is there a particular side of the ball or maybe position group that you would say, if it's a weakness or maybe even just a big question mark, what would you say that area is on the team?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's so weird with the transfer portal. It kind of just messes all of this up. Biggest question mark. So I'm trying to figure out. Offensive line will be a question mark just because it's kind of you kind of just want to see what the unit looks like and what the depth looks like. So I'd throw that as in terms of like a major question mark. But then I would say tight end is kind of a question mark because Jalen Conyers transfers out. You bring in Marcuston Douglas from Florida State. You bring in Cameron Harple from San Diego State. And then in spring ball, another one of our tight ends, Bryce Pierre, transfers out. And then we got a guy who was at Cincinnati and was at Colorado spring practice before leaving. So I would say tight end is probably the biggest unknown, but I also don't feel worried about it, if that makes sense, because all the guys that are coming in have like the body size and some level of productivity that like I'm expecting it to be fine. So yeah.
Yeah. And and I misspoke at the beginning. I mentioned that this was week 3, I think initially, but this is actually week 2, September 7th. Yeah. If you fast forward to September 8th and kind of look at the newspaper, the Starkville Daily newspaper from Mississippi State, it kind of had 2 different headlines we'll kind of go over and kind of get your thoughts on for the way too far out prediction headlines. The first one is this. How would you answer this? Arizona State beats Mississippi State because if they were to beat them, what would that reason be? Just kind of sitting where we are right now in May.
I would say the defense, because you guys have Jeff Lebby as your head coach now, right? And he's an air raid guy. Okay, so I would say defense quells the air raid more than people might think it would. That's a bad headline, but you get my point. And then also, I
Mhm.
think our quarterback, Sam Levitt, I think he's going to be better than people think, and he's also much more mobile than people think. So I would say Levitt makes a few plays on offense, and then the defense does enough to slow down Mississippi State.
Okay, that's interesting. So on the flip side of that, Mississippi State beats Arizona State because.
Yeah, this is tough because I don't know much about you guys, but I would say I think just I think there's a possibility that if you guys really run the ball and commit to that, if ASU is like worried about the air raid and all this, and you guys just kind of focus on the run game and take advantage of that extra space in the defense, then that could be problematic for ASU. And I mean, you guys probably have some really big, SEC offensive linemen, that could. I mean, I don't think the interior of our defensive line is like the you know, Georgia or anything like that. So that would probably be why.
And to kind of familiarize, oftentimes we're thinking around this time in May and June about our teams, what the makeup of our teams are like, and our fan bases. So we really don't think too much about our opponents and our opponents' fan bases and that kind of things, at least at this point in time, maybe the week of. But just for folks who don't know, how would you describe Arizona State fans, the alumni, when you think of going to a game there at Frank Cush Field? What would you say is kind of the aura, the feeling, the vibe, however you want to say it? How would you explain Arizona State for someone who does not know?
Yeah. So I think this year it'll be a much better atmosphere than it was in the few recent years, just because there was a lot of just mistrust. I mean, a lot of it still exists, but there's a lot of like distrust in the athletic program, and especially when Herm like entering the 22 season with Herm Edwards was just a complete waste of time for everyone. So like there's a lot of sore feelings with all that. And then last year you entered the season, our former athletic director announced the bowl ban like 4 days before the season started,
Mm.
which to me was like, oh, we have people who did buy season tickets already locked in. Okay, great. And now, by the way, we 100% will not be going to a bowl game. So this year, I think, especially for the Mississippi State game, I think it'll be a good environment. I think most ASU fans are pretty chill. And, there's going to be, you know, every group of fan base has their uh, bad actors or whatever. But like, I think it's going to be, just a party vibe. I don't think there's going to be a lot of like talking down. Like, I don't know how some fan bases where like you're like a blue blood or whatever, and maybe you look at other fan bases different. I don't think that's going to be a case. Like, I think it'll just be everyone's trying to have a good time before the game. It'll 100% be a night game if it's that early in the year. So that'll probably get the crowd a little bit more turned up. Tailgating is not great at ASU because there's just not like a good like grass area near the
Mm.
stadium for people to do that. That said, there is a great like bar scene within walking distance of the stadium, so that, in my opinion, more than makes up for it.
Mm.
Uh, and yeah, I think Mississippi State fans who come down to Phoenix, I think they'll like it. Like the thing is with like ASU is very close to like the Phoenix airport. It's close to or relatively close to downtown Phoenix, Scottsdale. Like there's just a lot of other stuff within the Phoenix area that's very accessible to the Tempe campus. And yeah, so it's a good vibe, and I think it's going to be freaking hot. I mean, you guys are well acquainted with that, I imagine, but it'll be hot in a different way. And like I said, because it's September, so it'll almost certainly be a night game, and so I think that'll really juice it up a little more, especially since like it'll probably it's just two kind of random Power Five teams playing a non-con game at night. Like
Mm.
I feel like it has some real crazy potential to happen just because. Um, I don't know. I mean, I don't really have a good reason for it. It just seems like it's going to be a crazy game. So
Well, we are so thankful for Mark for coming on our podcast. Thank you so much for listening to the My Dogs Are Barking podcast in Hail State.